Hello everyone, Namaste. Myself Professor Vilas Anil Chavan, working as an assistant professor in the Department of Forensic Science, Yashavantrao Chavan, Autonomous Institute of Science, Satara. So in this lecture, we are going to study unit number 2, that is crime scene documentation from the paper number B.F.Sc 301, and the name of paper is Criminalistics 1. So first, we'll discuss the content of unit number 2, that is crime scene documentation. So what exactly we are going to learn from this unit. So first we'll have a discussion about crime scene documentation, what exactly documentation is and why is it so important in forensic investigations, and also we'll be learning about different steps that can be taken while documenting the crime scene, such as note taking, videography, photography, sketching. So these are the 4 steps which are very useful for documenting the crime scene. Then also we will learn about different crime scene measurement techniques, so such as baseline, polar coordination, then cross line projection. So these are some crime scene measurement techniques, so by using which we can complete our sketching, crime scene sketching. So that also we'll learn here, and also along with this we will also learn what exactly crime scene logs are and how to maintain crime scene logs and why is it so important to maintain the crime scene logs. So these all things we will learn in this lecture. Also we'll also have a discussion about legal consideration at crime scene, exactly what role is there of law. So that also we'll discuss in this unit. Then also we'll have a brief discussion about coordination between police personnel and forensic scientists on the scene of crime and their what exactly they do there on crime scene, that we'll discuss. And at last we'll have a discussion about evaluation of 5 W's and 1 H, and here 5 W's are who, what, when, where, why, and 1H is how. So we'll have a in detail discussion about these all points. So this was the content of your unit number 2, that is crime scene documentation. So now let's start with the definition of crime scene documentation. So it is nothing but a visual record of every bit of crime scene. So that can be called as crime scene documentation. So once the crime scene has been evaluated by the preliminary scene survey, the crime scene's condition must be recorded or documented. This is perhaps the single most important task of the crime scene investigator, given that crime scenes are transitory and begin to change the instant after they are created. It is essential to have a permanent record of the scene as it was before processing. The purpose of crime scene documentation, or we can call it as a goal, is to permanently record the condition of the crime scene and its physical evidences. It is the most time-consuming activity at the scene and requires the investigator to stay organized and very systematic. Problem-solving skills, innovations, and originality will also be needed. So here the 4 major tasks of documentation are, as we have already discussed in our content, that is note taking, videography, photography, and sketching. So these all 4 necessary steps are there. So all 4 are necessary and none is an adequate substitute for another. So all 4 steps are required there. For example, notes are not substitute for photography and video is not substitute for sketching. So here each tool must be applied when and where needed to give as complete a record as possible. So hope you have understood what exactly crime scene documentation is and what exactly goal of crime scene documentation is. So now next, move towards next slide. The investigating officer shall maintain documentation as a permanent record. He should also review preliminary survey of scene of crime to determine what kind of documentation is needed, whether it required photography, video, sketch, measurements, notes. So he has to decide what kind of documentation technique he or some other officer should apply there. And also the notes and the report should be done in a chronological order and should include no opinion, no analysis or no conclusion, but just the facts. So here the documentation should only include facts. And also a general description of the scene of crime should be given just as the investigating officer sees it when he or she do the preliminary survey. Now here the crime scene investigator uses different instruments and techniques to record the crime scene, or we can call it as to document the crime scene. So here used utensils are digital and film cameras, then different types of films, various lenses, flashes, filters, a tripod stand, a sketch pad, then graph papers, pen and pencils, measuring tape, rulers and a notepad. And also along with this he may also use a cam recorder and a camera boom. So these are all the required things to document the crime scene. Now we'll discuss first step of crime scene documentation, that is note taking. So here effective notes as part of a crime scene investigation serve as a written record of all of the crime scene activities. The notes are taken as the activities are done, so they are not subject to memory loss at a later time. A general guideline for note taking is to consider the W's, which is our last point of syllabus, that is who, what, when, where and why, in addition to some following information such as notification information. So once the investigating officer has arrived on a crime scene, then his role is to note the date and time, also method of notification and information received. So he has to mention, or he has to note who has called him and who has given the information and what kind of information he has received. That all information he has to mention in his note report. So that is notification information. The next is arrival information. So he should note the means of transportation, date and time, then personnel present at the scene and any notification to be made. So how he came here, that is means of transportation, then when and what was the time when he arrived there, then what who all officers were there at the scene of crime. That also he has to record in his note. So this all information will be noted under the arrival information title. The next is scene description. So he should note the weather condition, then location, type and condition, then major structures, identification of transient and conditional evidences, and also containers holding evidences of recent activities such as ashtrays or trash cans, etc. Then clothing, furniture and any weapons present. So he has to mention every bit of crime scene in his note. Then also he has to note victim description also. So here in most jurisdictions the body should never be moved or disturbed until the medical examiner has given approval. So here medical officer is must required in order to move the body. So once given permission, then note victim position, then structure of wounds, clothing, jewelry or identification marks. So these all things should be noted in investigation note report. Then also has to note the crime scene team's details, such as note assignments to team members. So whatever assignments have been given to the officers, so their name and their role has to be mentioned in his report, also walkthrough information, that is initial stage of crime scene investigation. So here documentation officer should note walkthrough information and also beginning and ending times and evidence handling results. So here accurate crime scene note taking is crucial at the initial crime scene investigation, but it is also essential for any subsequent investigations that may follow. This note must include accurate and reliable measurement of distances and locations. So this was all about the note taking. Hope you have understood. If you have any problem, then drop me a mail on my mail ID. Then next step is videography, which is very much important. So here video recording, or we can call it as videography of the crime scene, has become a routine procedure for crime scene documentation. Its acceptance is widespread due to its ability to provide a virtual image of the scene and the increased availability of affordable equipment with user-friendly features such as DVD recording, built-in stability, digital zoom lenses, and compact size. Jury acceptability and expectations have also added to the recognized use of video recording of the crime scene investigations. Videography of the crime scene should follow the scene survey in scientific crime scene investigation. It should not include any members of the crime scene team or their equipments. It should not be narrated and should not contain any audio recording of subjective information at the scene. So these are the guidelines. So the following points which I am going to discuss summarizes the process that should be followed for effective videotaping of crime scene. So first step is document the recording by use of a placard that includes the case number, date, time, location, and videographer's name. Second point is begin with the scene surroundings, include roads to and from the scene. Before taping the general views of the scene itself, use the 4 compass points as a guide. The next, provide a general orientation of the scene. Videotape the orientation of item of evidence in relation to the overall scene. Wide angle views are especially useful. Do not jump from one location to another. Instead, use a smooth transition that encompasses the overall location of evidences. Then record the victim's viewpoint. Move to a safe location near the victim and record the 4 compass points viewed away from the victim. Camera technique should include smooth movements. Use a tripod or monopod if possible. Use additional lighting for all interior scenes. So here most cam recorders have low light atomic aperture corrections, but additional lighting is suggested. Once videotaping has been completed, review it on the scene and reshoot the scene as needed. The original videos are evidences and should not be edited or changed, and make copies when required. Video recording of crime scene is a valuable tool for providing an overall accurate impression of the crime scene that often cannot be accomplished by the other documentation tasks. However, it is never an adequate substitute for any of the other tasks. So hope you have understood the step of crime scene documentation, that is videography. Now we'll move towards our next point, that is photography. So digital photography provides the crime scene investigator with powerful tools for capturing, analyzing, and storing the record of the crime scene and its physical evidences. These digital image tools complement the traditional video and still photography used in crime scene documentation. The advantages of digital images include instant access to the images, easy integration into existing electronic technologies, and no need for the often expensive film processing. So here each pieces of evidences should be photographed to illustrate where it was found, to establish relationship of evidences to the victim. Also, photographs of evidences should be taken from straight above, eliminating potential distance distortion. So these are the guidelines. Then for example, if there is a presence of blurred pattern, then blurred pattern should be photographed along with the scale from different angles. And also one should identify the type of weapon of offense from blood stain pattern on scene of crime. Now next is requirement for photographic documentation of crime scene. So here, for the documentation purpose, we must require a camera that is SLR 35mm is most common. Then normal lenses, for example 50 to 60mm. Then wide angle lens, close-up lens with accessories, electronic flash with cords, tripod stand, image card or film. It may be color and black and white also. Then label material such as cards, pen, markers, scales or rulers, flashlights, extra batteries and photo log sheet. So these are the requirement for photography. So this was all about the photography. The next is photo log. So here, every photo the crime scene investigator takes considers it into the photo log. So once he has done with the photographing, then he has to mention the details of all the photographs in proper way. So this log documents the details of every photo, including the photograph number, a description of the object or scene in the photograph, the location of the object or scene, the time and the date the photograph was taken, and any other descriptive details that might be relevant. So these all things should be there in photo log report. So without a good photo log, the picture of the scene lose a lot of their value. So if your photo has if you have to give a legal value to your photo, then this all information should be there in your photo log. It should include date, name of photographer, case number, and what kind of equipment has been used to photograph the crime scene. That should be also there in your photo log report. So this was about the photo log. Now move towards our next point, that is guidelines for photographing crime scenes. So generally there are three types of photography, that is overall photography, mid-range photography and close-up photography. So here overall photograph should encompasses the entire large scene and be overlapping. Also it should represent a 360-degree perspective and include a landmark. Also overall photograph should include identifying marks such as house numbers or license plates. So this all information should be there. So here the person who is going to photograph the crime scene, so he should take overall photographs of the area surrounding this scene from its perimeter from multiple locations and angles. Then also you should include exteriors of buildings, cars, both side of entries and exits and bystanders. So also overall photos may also encompass smaller sub-scenes that exist within the larger scenes. For outdoor scenes, take photos of surroundings, buildings and major structures, roads or paths of travel into or away from the scene, street signs or survey markers, mailboxes or address numbers. Take aerial photograph when possible and photograph before 10 AM or after 2 PM if possible. And for indoor scenes, consider photography from each corner of room, looking into the room. Use the 4 compass points or room corners. Then overlapping of views, then doors leading into or from the structure. Then use tripod in low light situation for increased depth of focus concerns. After the scene is photographed as found, additional photographs with placards, used as evidence identifier must be fully visible in overall photographs when they are used, such as when mid-range and close-ups will be taken of the scene. They must be placed in close proximity to the subjects of the photograph. While taking photographs of scene, record related information in notes. Also, it is critical to use a systematic approach to note taking while taking photographs to maintain a record of your activities and the order and location of pictures as they are taken. Also, specify the changes you made to a scene while taking photographs, such as when a light was turned on or objects were moved. Then note taking should occur throughout the photography session. So here, along with photography, note taking should be done. Then finish note taking at the scene. Include the time that photographing began and was completed in the notes. Hope you have understood. So this was all about the overall photos, what precaution one should take while photographing exteriors and photographing interiors. The next is mid-range photograph. So as we know, it is very much important to take photographs that establish the relationship of objects or reference points in this scene. So here, in order to record the crime scene, take mid-range photographs before and after placing placards or rulers. Also take close-up photographs immediately after taking the mid-range photograph when appropriate. It may be appropriate to follow mid-range photographs of scene with close-up pictures of the same scene when showing a scene before, during and after placard or ruler placement, near views of human injuries or vehicle accident damage. Also, while taking photographs of scene, record related information in notes. Take photograph of transient evidence from a position that shows this pattern relative to other objects in the area. Also, it is a perpendicular to this pattern, and take picture of the scene before and after placing the placard and rulers and after removing the placards and rulers. Then next is close-up photos. So here, photograph fingerprint, footprint, shoe print or tire track evidences using black and white film when you are using film. So this guideline is for close-up photograph. So this guideline may change as per the evidences. So carefully place the ruler and camera perpendicular to each other and relative to the impression. So this is the guideline how one should photograph the close-up photos. When the photograph needs to be accurately scaled, the ruler must be on the same plane as the impression. The camera lens must be perpendicular, that is, it should be 90 degrees to the subject. Then use a level and tripod to position the camera accurately. Take multiple shots with the light or flash at different angles such as 0 degree, 15 degree, 45 degree, etc. to achieve the best possible photographs. So this was all about the close-up photos. The next is guideline for all the photos. So here, record in log, that is, use camera setting that achieve good depth of focus. No extraneous objects like team members, equipment, feet or hands, and also be aware of reflective surfaces. When in doubt, photograph it again. So this is the guideline. Now we'll move towards next slide. So these are the photograph of a crime scene. So here you can see the overall photographs. So overview shots are the widest possible views of the entire scene. So entire building is captured here. The next is mid-range photograph. So here, this type of photography includes not only the evidence but also its location in a room and its distance from other pieces of evidences. As you can see here, so there is a presence of blood pool, then pathway and the dead body. So here this picture depicts the relation between blood pool and victim's dead body. So hope you have understood mid-range photograph. The next is close-up photograph. So as discussed earlier, close-up photograph will be of a close shot of particular wound or particular evidences. So this was all about the photography. Now we'll move towards next point, that is sketching, crime scene sketching. So here the crime scene sketch, which accurately portrays the physical facts, and also it relates the sequence of events at the scene, and also crime scene sketches establishes the precise location and relationship of objects and evidence at this scene. Also it creates a mental picture of the scene for those who were not present on a crime scene. And also, as we know, crime scene is a permanent record of the scene. So this is the basics of crime scene sketching. So this is the example of crime scene sketching, which depicts all the possible items present inside the crime scene. Now we'll take an overview. So here crime scene sketch assists in interviewing and interrogating persons, then preparing an investigative report, and also it assists in presenting the case in court of law. The sketch supplements the photographs, notes, plaster cast and other investigative techniques. So there are basically two types of sketches, that is rough sketch and finished or scale sketch, or we can call it as final sketch. The next is rough sketch. Now we'll discuss one by one. So here rough sketch is the first pencil drawn outline of the scene and the location of objects and evidence within this outline. So usually rough sketch is not drawn to scale, although distances are measured and indicated in the sketch. Sketch after photographs are taken and before anything is moved. And while sketching the crime scene, the crime scene sketcher should sketch as much as possible. So here you can see the picture depicting the rough sketch. So rough sketch can be made on scene of crime without scale but with measurement. So this was all about the rough sketch. Next is sketching materials or required materials for sketching. So here basic materials like paper, pencil, measuring tape, ruler, clipboard, eraser, compass and some other things can be required to complete the crime scene sketch. Now next is general consideration in sketching. So first is a sketch of a crime scene is required when spatial relationships or proportional measurements are needed. Then use spatial relationship to relate evidence to other object. Use proportional measurements to calculate such things as bullet trajectory angles or to reconstruct accident details. Then the rough sketch is the first sketch drawn at the scene. Multiple rough sketches may be required depending on the crime. The sketch include a scene outline with the location of objects and evidence clearly marked. A finished sketch is derived from the rough sketch. Draw the rough sketch before anything is moved or destroyed and after photographs are taken. Do not alter the scenes depending on the crime. Draw one or all of this type of sketches. a sketch showing the surrounding areas, a sketch showing only measurements, and a sketch showing location of objects such as the location of evidences or victims. Also, measurements should be accurate to within 1 by 4 inches. Also include outside of the drawn crime scene measurements of dimension of rooms, furniture, doors and windows, and distances between objects, entrances and exits, bodies and persons. Draw details such as object size proportionally in a rough sketch. Take measurements from fixed location reference point such as walls or curves or from stationary appliances. Include as much information as possible in the sketch: streets, plants, entry and exit points, location of any evidences such as bullets and cartridges, etc. Do not alter a rough sketch after leaving the crime scene. If changes are required of the rough sketch, photocopy the original rough sketch to preserve its integrity. Newer technology makes use of laser scanning devices to perform crime scene sketching. The employment of these devices should be reserved to investigators trained in their use. Create a title block on the graph paper being used for the sketch in the lower right corner of the paper. The title block typically includes the case number, crime type, victim name, name and ID of sketcher, name and ID of a person verifying measurements, location of sketch and date completed. Also, along with this, create a legend for the sketch on the graph paper used for the sketch. Each sketch must include a legend that is specific to it. A legend identifies north facing direction, usually points to top of page. Then identification symbols used for information in sketch. Then sketch ID and scale used. So in order to perform the sketching, first has to observe and plan. Then the investigating officer should measure the distance, then he should outline the area, then he should locate objects and evidence within the outline, then he should record the details, then he should make the notes, and he should identify the sketch within legends and a scale. Then also, now we'll talk in detail, that is measure and outline the area. So here an accepted practice for assisting identification symbol is to use compass points to identify walls, use evidence numbers assigned to objects to identify them in the sketch. The legend will be updated after drawing the sketch to ensure accuracy and completeness, and to include measurements for dimensions of rooms, furnitures, doors and windows, and also it should include distances between objects, entrance and exits, and bodies and persons. So here for measurement, one should use conventional units of measurement such as inches, feet, centimeters and meters. Then north should be at the top of the paper, as I said before. Then you should determine the scale. So for scale, take the longest measurement at the scene and divide it by the longest measurement of the paper used for sketching. So this is the rule for scale. So here are some common scales are given. So as you can see there, these are the common scales. Also, in order to measure the distances, so measure from fixed locations such as walls, trees, telephone poles, corners, curbs, outlets and any immovable object. So from these all things, investigator can measure the distances. Now we'll talk about crime scene measurement techniques. So many types of perspectives are used for sketching crime scenes, but the two most common are the overhead, that is bird's eye view sketch, and the elevation or side view sketch. Occasionally, a combination perspective sketch called a cross projection sketch is used to integrate an overhead sketch with an elevation sketch. The techniques are used to obtain measurements for the crime scene sketch are triangulation, baseline, or we can call it as fixed line, polar coordinates, and cross projection method. So these are the measurement techniques used for crime scene sketching. All three techniques identify two starting fixed point, and all subsequent measurements of the crime scene are in relation to those points. The location of these fixed points are known or can be precisely determined. This fixed nature is used for subsequent reconstruction. So here, good fixed points can be building corners, then in-ground survey markers, large trees, or recorded utility poles, as I said before. So these are the techniques for measuring techniques. First one is a triangulation. So here two fixed point will be there, and from two fixed point distance of evidences will be measured. The next is rectangular coordinates. So distance of evidences from two fixed point will be measured in a perpendicular line. The next is baseline, which is best used for outdoor crime scene. So here single baseline will be, imaginary baseline will be drawn there, and the distance, perpendicular distance will be measured from the baseline. And next is polar coordinates, which is best used for outdoor crime scene. Now we'll discuss one by one. So here, as you can see, this is the rectangular coordinates. So it uses two adjacent walls as fixed points, as distances are measured at right angles. So here the rectangular coordinate method is used when measuring the distance to an object from two mutually perpendicular objects, such as walls that meet at 90-degree angle. Then next is baseline method. The transecting baseline coordinate method is used to measure items of evidences when there are numerous objects in the crime scene and other measuring techniques will not work. This is accomplished by laying a tape measure down so that it crosses the entire room or area to be measured. The first tape measure becomes the baseline for all other measurements in the crime scene. Measurements are then made perpendicularly from this tape by laying another tape measure at a 90-degree angle to the first tape and measuring out to the evidences. So this was about the baseline method. The next is triangulation method. The triangulation method utilizes two fixed permanent objects within the crime scene, and measurements are taken from each fixed point to each pieces of evidences. So there will be a two fixed point, and from those two fixed points distances of evidences will be measured. The next is compass point method, or also we can call it as the polar coordinate method, and it is more appropriate for an outdoor scenes in which only a single fixed or reference point is present. As you can see there is a single fixed point. Then it measures both the distances and direction, that is angle, of an object from a known reference point. So here angle as well as distances are being measured. The angle can be measured with either a large protractor or an optical device such as a transit or a compass. Also, the protractor technique with a 360-degree protractor is useful for underwater scene. So this was all about the compass point method or polar coordinate method. Next is cross projection method. So here, a projection sketch usually contains only one viewpoint and depicts objects on one plane. It presents floors and walls as they were on the one surface. So these all measurement techniques we will be studying in your practical session. Now next is crime scene logs. A crime scene entry log is used to record the comings and goings of everyone who enters the scene. It is extremely important to log down a crime scene as soon as it is discovered for many reasons, some of them being to make sure no one unauthorized enters, no evidences is taken out or put in, then make sure nothing is disturbed or removed except by authorized crime scene technicians, and also make sure nothing is contaminated. It is also crucial to know who is coming and going for prosecution and defense purpose. If a crime scene is in a house, it is usually locked to allow entry from only one door. If there are people coming or going from two doors, then an officer would be stationed at both doors with a lock. So this was all about the crime scene log. And if you are not maintaining the proper crime scene log, then you will fail to collect the evidences. So this is the example of crime scene security log. So there will be a assigned scene security officer's name, the date, then department of police, then file number, then location of crime, and the name of officer and his rank, then his initial, date and time in, then date and time out, then what kind of duties he or she has performed on a scene of crime, and if any contamination is caused, then it has to be mentioned in your crime scene security log. Now next is legal consideration at crime scene. So here, what exactly role of law is there on scene of crime, that we will learn now. So as we know, once you have got the information that crime has happened, then police has to launch the FIR. So there is a special law for launching FIR. So now again, in order to search the crime scene, police officer should get a search warrant. So for getting the search warrant, police officer has to convince the magistrate that something illegal has been committed by someone at some place, and in order to arrest or in order to search the evidences, we must have search warrant. So once the magistrate is convinced, then he will issue the search warrant. Then police officer will visit a crime scene and he will search the crime scene. So in many cases there is no need of search warrant. Then also chain of custody. If chain of custody is not maintained properly during the crime scene investigations, then opposite party's lawyer will raise a question on collected evidences by saying that chain of custody is not maintained properly, then why you are considering these evidences as legal. So this legal question will be arised if you have not maintained chain of custody. So maintaining chain of custody is very much important. Once all the evidences are collected, so here all the evidences must be collected as per the standards given by or standards set by the different agencies. So here, if you have collected and preserved all the evidences scientifically, then only you can submit your evidences, and that can submission of this kind of evidences will be accepted by law. Now we'll have a discussion about some terminologies. What exactly search warrant is? So here search warrant is judge or magistrate's written order for a police officer to search a specified place and to seize evidences. That is search warrant. Then what is anticipatory? So here anticipatory is certain evidence will be found in a specific place at a given time. That is anticipatory. The next is doctrine of particularity. So here doctrine of particularity is warrant must state specifically what is to be searched. So here once the search warrant is issued by the magistrate, then while issuing the search warrant, magistrate has to mention what exactly to be searched. So this information should be mentioned there. So mentioning this kind of information is nothing but doctrine of particularity. The next is four corners rule. So here all information pertinent to search warrant affidavit must be included within the four corners of the affidavit. So here your affidavit paper, that is your legal bond paper, so just consider the four corners of paper. So whatever information will be issued by the magistrate in order to issue the search warrant, so all the information should be there within the four corners of your affidavit paper. That is four corners rule. The next is probable cause. So here the probable cause is the facts or apparent facts that would lead a reasonable person to believe that a crime has been committed or that evidence of the crime could be found at a specific location. So here probable cause is nothing but the belief that something illegal has been committed, something or some crime has been committed, or that evidence of the crime could be found at specific location. That is your probable cause. So probable cause will help in issuing the search warrant. The next is standing. So here person must have a reasonable expectation of privacy to protest an illegal search. So in some cases police may raid or police may visit any house or buildings without search warrant. So in that case the owner of that property has right to protest an illegal search. So that is standing. Now next is rules for admissibility of scientific evidences. So there are different rules given by different agencies that we'll learn in detail. So here in order to determine the admissibility of scientific evidence, there must be method validation and laboratory validation. That means whatever method you are going to use and whatever instruments you are going to use for the examination, that should be well validated. Also the evidence must also be relevant to the investigation and it should be reliable. After the case Fry versus United States, the court issued a test called Fry's rule for determining admissibility. The Fry rule states that the principle governing admissibility is the general acceptance of the test underlying principles by the scientific community to which the test belongs. So this is the statement of Fry's rule. So now we'll talk about summary of Fry versus United States case. So as you can see there is a link. If you visit that link, then you will get full case. So basically the evidence and the analysis method must have general acceptance in the scientific community. That means whatever instrument, whatever technique, whatever chemicals or whatever you are going to use for the examination of evidences, so that should be generally accepted by scientific community. So this is the condition of examining the evidences by using different instruments and techniques. So for full case you can visit this link. The next is Daubert versus Merrell Dog Pharmaceuticals. Again, same link has been provided to you. You can visit that link and there you will get full details of this case. So here, so what were the findings of this case is whether a theory or technique can be and has been tested. That means, can it be retested? Can the same test can be performed or reperformed for another evidence or the same evidences? That should be checked. The next is whether it has been subjected to peer review and publications, whether the same technique or instrument has been reviewed by different agencies or different experts. That should be checked. Also, whether in respect to a particular technique there is a high known or potential rate of error. So while creating any instruments or techniques, there should be a known rate of potential error that should be there, and that should be mentioned in your techniques manual. The next is whether there are standards controlling the techniques operation, that also be mentioned there in your manual. So these all criteria should be followed by the examiner while examining the scientific evidences scientifically. Now we'll talk about Daubert standard. The federal courts have since issued a set of criteria for scientific evidence called the Daubert standard after case William Daubert versus Merrell Dog Pharmaceuticals. This standard creates a more rigorous test for scientific admissibility. So whatever standards just now we have discussed, so those all standards should be followed by the scientist or expert while performing the scientific examination of evidences. Then and then only your evidence will be admissible in the court of law. The next is Fry and Daubert. So using both the Fry rule and the Daubert standard, the federal court have developed the federal rules of evidence, that is FRE, and same rule has been followed by the Indian agencies also. So these rules apply to federal cases only, but many states have adopted them. So same standards have been followed by other countries like India. So now next is coordination between police personnel and forensic scientists at scene of crime. So basically this is assignment for you. So just write down the assignment and send it me on my mail ID. So I'll give you brief idea. So here, what exactly role of police officer is on crime scene, and what exactly scientist or forensic expert performs his duty on crime scene. So that is the coordination between police personnel and forensic scientists at crime scene. So here you must understand what exactly the role of police officer is and what exactly the role of forensic scientist is. So here I'll give you a brief introduction about police and forensic experts. So the role of police personnel is to protect the crime scene and ultimately protecting the physical evidences, and also they have to conduct a scene survey, then they have to go for searching the evidences. If not possible, then they have to call forensic scientist for the collection, packaging and preservation of evidences. Then forensic team will arrive on a scene of crime, then they will search for the evidences scientifically, then they will collect the evidences, preserve the evidences scientifically, then they will pack the evidences, then they will seal, label and finally dispatch the evidences from crime scene to the crime scene laboratory or forensic science laboratory. So that is the coordination between police personnel and forensic scientists at scene of crime. Now the last point of this unit is the evaluation of 5 W's, that is who, what, when, where, why, and one is that is how. So here finding answers to this W's and H will give clear about or which will give clear idea about whole crime. So this is the case. So I'll read, and from this case we will try to find who, what, when, how, why, and where. So in the name and by authority of the state of Texas, the grand jury of Tarrant County, state of Texas, duly organized at the April term 2010 of the 213th District Court of said country, in said court at said term, do present that John Doe on or about the 20th day of March 2010 in said country and state did then and there intentionally and knowingly cause the death of Joe Blow by stabbing him with a knife against the peace and dignity of the state. So this is the case. Now we have to find out all 5 W's and 1 H, that is who, what, when, where, why, and 1 H. So now we'll find out who. So here who is John Doe. So here who is John Doe. Then what? Then he has caused the death of Joe Blow. When? On or about this date here is March 20th of March 2010. Where? Tarrant County, Texas. And how? By stabbing him with knife. And why? It's not necessary, but you can find the solutions why he has done this in or after the investigation. So these are the elements which we have find out from this case. And this is the end of your unit number 2, that is crime scene documentation. Hope you have understood everything. If you have any doubts or any curiosity about this topic, then please mail me on my mail ID. Thank you.